Good evening, and thank you for joining me for another Boring Books for Bedtime. I hope tonight's selection provides all the boredom your busy brain needs to quiet down and let you get some sleep. Before we begin, I'd like to give a special shout out of thanks to 3 new members of our Patreon family, Diane, Amber, and Lilia. Thank you all so much for supporting this podcast. By becoming members of Patreon, you help us remain 100% listener-supported and ad-free for everyone, and it's very much appreciated. If you're interested in supporting Boring Books for Bedtime and finding out more about the perks available to subscribers, including exclusive episodes heard nowhere else, you'll find a link to Patreon in the show description. You'll also find a link to buymeacoffee.com, where you can support us with a one-time tip, no subscription required. I hope you'll take a moment to check them out. Now, let's read and relax. Find a comfortable spot. Adjust your volume. Take a nice deep breath in. Let it out slowly. And off we go. Tonight, let's relax with a guide to one of the world's great collections of stuff, with How to See the British Museum in 4 Visits by W. Blanchard Gerald, first published in London in 1852. Let's begin. How to See the British Museum in 4 Visits. Introduction. The money to found a British museum was raised by a lottery in the middle of the last century. Sir Hans Sloane, having offered his books and Museum of Natural History to Parliament for less than half its value, £20,000, it was purchased, together with the famous Harleian and Cottonian manuscripts, and deposited in Montague House, Bloomsbury, which had been bought of the Earl of Halifax for the sum of £10,250. Of the present British Museum, this beginning forms a very insignificant part. The nucleus was established, however, and soon eminent men, who valued their literary and scientific collections as storehouses that should be accessible to all classes of students, began to turn their attention to the collections in Montague House. Foremost among the donors, George II should be mentioned, as having made over to the nation the Royal Library, together with the right of demanding a copy of every book entered at Stationers' Hall. Successively, the libraries of Sir Joseph Banks, Dr. Birch, Sir John Hawkins, Dr. Burney, and David Garrick, and the Royal, Arundel, Lansdowne, Bridgewater, and other manuscripts were added to the great store. Captain Cook returned home with additions to the Museum of Natural History. Sir William Hamilton's collection of vases was purchased in 1772. The spoils of Abercrombie's Egyptian campaign enriched the museum with some fine Egyptian antiquities. Grants of money secured the Townley marbles, the Fagalian sculptures, and at last the Elgin marbles. And of late the accessions to the vast collection, including Layard's treasures, the Xanthian marbles, fossils, birds, and curiosities from the frozen seas, China, the solitudes of Central Africa, and other remote places where scientific men have been of late prosecuting their studies, have been received. In 1823, it was allowed by Parliament that the collection had grown too large for the house in which it was crammed, and accordingly in this year it was resolved to destroy the old residence of the Earl of Halifax, and build a new structure on its site. Sir Robert Smirke, the architect of the present structure, has certainly had good cause to complain of the meager supplies voted from time to time for the building, which has been 28 years in progress. The regulations for the admission of the public have fairly kept pace with the progress of those liberal ideas to which the collection is greatly indebted, and of which it is a monument. It will be interesting for the visitor of today to contrast the rules by which he is admitted with those that fettered his ancestors of the 18th century. In the year 1759, the trustees of this institution published their Statutes and Rules relating to the inspection and use of the British Museum. This instructive document may now serve to illustrate the darkness from which even now we are struggling. Those visitors who now consider it rather an affront to be required to give up their cane or umbrella at the entrance to our museums and galleries will be astonished to learn that in the early days of the museum, those persons who wished to inspect the national collection were required to make previous application to the porter in writing, stating their names, condition, and places of abode, as also the day and hour at which they desired to be admitted. Their applications were written down in a register, which was submitted every evening to the librarian or secretary in attendance. If this official, judging from the condition and ostensible character of an applicant, deemed him eligible for admittance, he directed the porter to give him a ticket on the following day. Thus the candidate for admission was compelled to make 2 visits before he could learn whether it was the gracious will of a librarian or secretary that he should be allowed the privilege of inspecting Sir Hans Sloane's curiosities. If successful, his trouble did not end when he obtained the ticket, for it was provided by the trustees that no more than 10 tickets should be given out for each hour of admittance. Accordingly, every morning on which the museum was accessible, the porter received a company of 10 ticket holders at 9 o'clock, ushered them into a waiting room till the hour of seeing the museum had come, to quote the words of the trustees. This party was divided into 2 groups of 5 persons, one being placed under the direction of the under-librarian and the other under that of the assistant in each department. Thus attended, the companies traversed the galleries, and on a signal being given by the tinkling of a bell, they passed from one department of the collection into another, an hour being the utmost time allowed for the inspection of one department. This system calls to mind the dragooning practiced in Westminster Abbey under the command of the gallant vergers, to the annoyance of leisurely visitors and of ardent but not active archaeologists. Sometimes, when public curiosity was particularly excited, the number of respectable applicants for admission to the museum exceeded the limit of the prescribed issue. In these cases, tickets were given for remote days, and thus at times when the lists were heavy, it must have been impossible for a passing visitor in London to get within the gateway of Montague House. In these old regulations, the trustees provided also that when any person having obtained tickets was prevented from making use of them at the appointed time, he was to send them back to the porter in order that other persons wanting to see the museum might not be excluded. 3 hours was the limit of the time any company might spend in the museum, and those who were so unreasonable or inquisitive as to be desirous of visiting the museum more than once might apply for tickets a second time, provided that no person had tickets at the same time for more than one. The names of those persons who, in the course of a visit, willfully transgressed any of the rules laid down by the trustees were written in a register, and the porter was directed not to issue tickets to them again. These regulations secured the exclusive attendance of the upper classes. The libraries were hoarded for the particular enjoyment of the worm, whose feast was only at rare intervals disturbed by some student regardless of difficulties. To the poor, worn, unheeded authors of those days, serenely starving in garrets, assuredly the British Museum must have been as impenetrable as a Bastille. We imagine the prim under-librarian glancing with a supercilious expression upon the names and addresses of many poor, aspiring, honorable men, men whose condition, to use the phrase of the trustees, bespoke not the gentility of that vulgar age. In those days, the weaver and the carpenter would as soon have contemplated a visit to St. James's Palace as have hoped for an admission ticket to the National Museum. These mean precautions of the last century contrast happily with the enlightened liberty of this. Crowds of all ranks and conditions besiege the doors of the British Museum, especially in holiday times, yet the skeleton of the elephant is spotless, and the bottled rattlesnakes continue to pickle in peace. The Elgin marbles have suffered no abatement of their marvelous beauties, and the coat of the camelopard is without a blemish. The Yorkshireman has his unrestrained stare at Sesostris. The undertaker spends his holiday over the mummies, and no official suppresses his professional objections to the coffins. The weaver observes the looms of the olden time. The soldier compares the Indian's blunt instrument with his own keen and deadly bayonet. The poor needlewoman enjoys her laugh at the rude sewing instruments of other tribes. The stonemason perhaps compares his tombs with the sarcophagi of ancient masters. No attendant is deputed to dog the heels of 5 visitors and to watch them with the cold eye of a jailer. No bell warns the company from one spot to another. All is open, free. Through the bright new galleries of Sir Robert Smirke, crowded with the natural productions of every clime, the printed thoughts of the greatest and best men, the marvelous art of forgotten ages, and the poor barbarisms of savage life, we propose to conduct the visitor in 4 distinct visits. Visit the first. On arriving in front of the British Museum for the first time, the visitor will not fail to notice the Grecian Ionic facade, ornamented with 44 columns and rising at its extreme point to the height of 66 feet. The sculpture which decorates the tympanum of the portico is the work of Sir Richard Westmacott, and is an allegorical representation of the progress of civilization. The spiritual influences that have successively worked upon the savage natures of the Dark Ages here have distinct types. Religion tames the savage. Paganism makes him a crouching sensualist. The Egyptian sees a god in the stars of heaven, and then the mathematician, the musician, the poet, and the painter set to work, and these prophets of mysterious beauties realize civilized mankind. The visitor enters the museum after ascending a noble flight of steps by a massive carved oak door into a fine entrance hall the ceiling of which is highly colored, and the general decoration of which is Grecian Ionic. Here he will observe, in addition to one or two of the Nineveh sculptures, at once 3 statues, one of the aristocratic lady sculptor, the Honorable Mrs. Dahmer, Chantry's statue of Sir Joseph Banks, and Rubiach's study of Shakespeare, presented to the museum by David Garrick. Before entering the galleries of the museum, the visitor should observe that the building faces the 4 points of the compass, and that the facade forms the southern line. This observation will facilitate a careful and regular examination of the interior. Branching westward from the entrance hall, then eastward to the gallery, is a noble flight of 70 steps, the walls of the staircase being richly inlaid with marble. Having ascended this staircase, the visitor's attention is at once arrested by 2 stuffed giraffes, the giraffe of North Africa and the giraffe of South Africa, given to the museum by the late Earl of Derby. These striking zoological specimens at once introduce the visitor to the Southern Central Zoological Room, which is devoted, together with the next room to the east, to hoofed animals. Looking eastward from the western side of the room, he will observe at once that his way lies down a passage marked on either side by formidable zoological specimens, which he would rather meet with their present anatomy of hay than in their natural condition. In the first room, near the giraffes, stand the walrus of the North Sea, the African rhinoceros, and the Manila buffalo. He will next observe that the walls of the room are lined with glass cases about 12 feet in height, and that in these cases various stuffed animals are grouped. The groups in this room include the varieties of the antelope, sheep, and goats. Grouped together in 2 or 3 cases are the sable and other antelopes from the Cape of Good Hope, the all-gazelle and the addax and its young from North Africa, the sing-sing and the koba from Western Africa, the sasabi, the chamois of the Alps, the subject of many a stirring mountain song, the goats of North Africa, the strange Siberian ibex, the grue and gorgon from the Cape, varieties of the domestic goat, and the beautiful cashmere goat. Here also are specimens of sheep, including the wild sheep from the Altai, the bearded sheep of North Africa, the American arguli, the Nahor and Caprine antelopes from Nepal, and upon the higher shelves of the cases are grouped the gazelles from Senegal, Nepal, and Madras, whose praises have been sung more than once. The beauty and grace of these delicate creatures, with their taper active limbs, and the soft expression of their heads, may be faintly gathered even from these inanimate stuffed skins with the glassy eyes, instead of the soft blue celebrated by the poet. Grouped hereabouts are also the 4-horned antelope of India, the pygmy antelope from the coast of Guinea, and the madoka from Abyssinia. Before leaving this room, or anteroom, to the great zoological sections of the museum, the visitor should notice the varieties of horns, straight and tortuous, but all graceful, of different kinds of hoofed animals. Advancing eastward, the visitor arrives in the Southern Zoological Gallery. Here, the visitor is still in the midst of the hoofed beasts. The way lies between 2 rows of animals. Of these, the visitor should notice particularly the wild oxen of India and Java, Compare the Indian rhinoceros with that of South Africa, and notice the hippopotamus family from South Africa, as well as a diminutive specimen of the Indian elephant and a half-grown elephant from Africa. Having noticed these ponderous creatures, the attention of the visitor will be next attracted to the llamas, which are arranged in the first two wall cases. Of these, the wild are generally brown, and the tame of mixed colors. The next 14 wall cases are filled with specimens of the different species of oxen and the elephant tribe. Among the former, the visitor should notice the white bulls of Scotland and Poland, the splendid Lithuanian bison with his shaggy throat, a present from the Russian emperor, the bison of the American prairies, and the eland. The specimens of the elephant tribe, ranged in the upper compartments of these cases, include the tapir of South America, the tenu from Sumatra, the European boar with its young, the Brazilian peccary, and other curious animals. Here, too, are specimens of the armadillo tribe. The attention of the visitor will, however, be soon riveted upon an animal which, with the beak of a duck and the claws of a bird, has the body of an otter. In Australia, its native country, this singular animal is commonly called a water mole, but to scientific men it is known as the mullingong. It is placed in the same order with its neighbor, the spring ant or echidna, also a native of Australia. Before leaving these cases, the visitor should pause to notice the sloths, and particularly the repulsive aspect of the yellow-faced sloth of South America. The visitor should now pass to the cases marked from 17 to 30. These are devoted to the horse tribe and deer. Here the reindeer from Hudson's Bay, the red fallow deer of Europe, the elk, and the cheetul of India will catch the eye immediately. The beautiful South African zebra is here also, grouped near the Asiatic wild ass, and the Zoological Society's hybrids of the zebra, wild ass, and common donkey. The upper shelves of the cases are devoted, as usual, to the smaller specimens of the tribe below. Here are the European roebuck, the West African water musk, the Javan musk, the white-bellied and golden-eyed musk. Having examined these zoological specimens, the visitor should proceed on his way east to the Mammalia Saloon. This saloon is one of the most interesting parts of the exhibition to the general visitor, as he sees here at a glance the various classes of the highest order of the animal creation, all grouped after their kinds and in that gradation of development which nature has assigned them. Those specimens which are placed on the floor in the central space of the room include some large varieties of the bears and a few small specimens of seals, including the young of the harp seal with the white fur which clothes them on their first appearance in the world, and the young of the Cape of Good Hope eared seal. But these isolated specimens should not engage the attention of the visitor before he has followed the systematic arrangement or classification adopted with regard to the animals deposited in the wall cases that line the saloon. The first series or family of animals to which, according to Cuvier, his particular attention should be attracted are the monkeys, ranged in the first 11 wall cases. These cases contain the species of monkeys found in the Old World. The varieties in color, shape, size, and attitude are endless. Here are the green monkeys from Western Africa, the white-throated monkey from India, the bearded monkey with a republican air about him, and the monkey who appears to have had his ears pulled, but is in reality known to scientific men as the red-eared monkey, both from Fernando Po. The Risley of monkeys, called the vaulting monkey, with his white nose, and the talapoin from Western Africa, the gaudy macaque, known as the brilliant from Japan, that dingy gentleman, the sooty mangabe from Africa, the African chimpanzee, to whom satirical gentlemen, with a turn for zoological comparisons, are greatly indebted, the orangutan with his young from Borneo, the presbytes, dusky and starred, from Singapore, Malacca, and Borneo, and the drill and mandrill from Africa. The monkeys of the New World are grouped in 6 cases, 12 to 18. Herein the visitor should particularly notice the curious spider monkeys from Brazil and Bolivia, the apes with large eyes like those of the owl called night apes, the howlers, so called from the incessant howling they maintain at night in their native forests, the quaint marmosets and handsome silky monkeys. The next 2 cases contain specimens of the lemurs, more familiarly known as Madagascar monkeys. Of these, the flying lemur is the most remarkable species. Specimens of this species are grouped in the lower part of the cases. They are from the Indian archipelago, and in the texture of their skin and the loose and light way in which it connects their limbs, they resemble bats. They nurse their young by forming a kind of couch with their body, suspended downwards from the branches of a tree. It now remains for the visitor to direct his attention to the fine collection of rapacious animals, ranged in 32 distinct wall cases in this room. The first tribe, taking the cases in their order of succession, to which the visitor's attention will be attracted on passing from the cases of lemurs, is the cat tribe. The animals which he will find in the first 7 cases, 21 to 27, are properly cats. Here is the South African lion, the fine black leopard, which is pointed out to visitors as a beast that killed its keeper, the lynxes of Spain, Sardinia, and America, the wild cats of Europe, the curious booted cat imported from the Cape of Good Hope, the American ocelots, and the Asiatic and African chows. These animals are picturesquely grouped in 7 cases. In the next case, in order of succession, 28, are the hyenas of South Africa and Egypt. Here are the spotted hyena with its young, and the striped hyena. The 3 following cases are filled with varieties of the civet family, esteemed for the strong scent which some of them, as the African civet and the Chinese and Indian civet, yield, including the hyena civet from the Cape of Good Hope, genets and ichneumons, which will be found on the lower shelves, and the Mexican house martin. The 5 following cases are filled with the varieties of the dog family. Here the sporting visitor may amuse himself by examining the points of the dogs of the 4 quarters of the globe. Here are the well-known Newfoundland dog, the wild dogs of different climates, the four-toed hunting dog of Abyssinia and South Africa, the Cape of Good Hope dog with its long ears, the varieties of fox and wolf, all expressing great activity and extraordinary cunning. Ladies will be pleased to notice a lap dog, almost hidden by his long hair, placed under a particular glass case. This exclusive little aristocrat is from Mexico. In the next case to which the visitor will direct his attention, 38, are grouped the varieties of the mustelina or martens of America and Europe. These lesser specimens of the cat tribe include the weasels of Himalaya, Mexico, and Siberia, the American and European polecats, the lesser otters from the north of America and Europe, and the curious animal known as the false sable of America. It is amusing to notice the sameness of expression, that of cunning, shown in the heads of every specimen of the cat tribe. The next case, 39, introduces the visitor to those mammalia which are included in the bear tribe. This tribe includes the raccoons, otters, badgers, skunks, gluttons, and bears. The case to which the visitor's attention is now directed contains the varieties of the glutton family, the Chinese musk weasel, the European and North American badgers, the Javan stinkard, and the American skunks and conepats. The next case, 40, is devoted to the otter family. These ingenious animals are found in the four quarters of the world. Here are the common European otter, the otters of Java and India, the clawless African otter from the Cape of Good Hope, and the sea and muffled otters from America. Next to these interesting animals are some of the bears, including the savage Arctic white bear, the Malay bear, and the Indian sloth bear. Next to these bears, the raccoons are grouped, and they close the collection illustrative of the bear tribe. In the case following those which contain the raccoons is one 43, in which the varieties of the mole tribe are arranged. These include moles from the four quarters of the world. There are the North American marsh moles and the long-tailed star-nosed moles, the golden moles from the Cape of Good Hope, the varieties of the shrew mouse, including the remarkable blue shrew mouse of India, the African elephant shrew, and the Russian musk shrew, the Javan insectivorous squirrel, and a curious variety of hedgehogs from opposite quarters of the globe. Having examined these inferior mammalia, the visitor will pass in direct order of succession to the cases in which the marsupial animals are deposited. These fill 9 wall cases, and they should be carefully examined as exhibiting a peculiar economy of animal life. The marsupial animals are placed by some zoologists in the lowest class of mammalia. They include carnivorous, herbivorous, and insectivorous families, and their headquarters appear to be Australia. In the first 2 cases, 44 and 45, which the visitor will examine, are the varieties of Australian phalangers, and here also are the New Holland bears, the Australian wombat, the flying squirrel of Norfolk Island, the flying phalangers, and in the right corner of the case are grouped those notable animals to which public curiosity has of late years been so keenly directed, the kangaroos. In the next 5 cases, 46 to 51, the visitor will find more varieties of these strange, awkward-looking creatures. Here amid the kangaroos of Australia are the long-nosed rock and jerboa kangaroos, the New Guinea tree kangaroo, and below the Australian koala. The 2 next cases, 52 and 53, contain the varieties of Australian opossums, and below are the opossums of America. These close the attractions of the wall cases, and the visitor should now glance round the saloon at the specimens of the varieties of the seal tribe, which are arranged along the tops of the wall cases. These include the leonine seal of the Southern Ocean, the Cape porpoise and dolphin, and the long-beaked dolphin of the Ganges. Having noticed these specimens, the visitor should proceed to examine the extensive collection of corals which are arranged upon the central tables of the salon. To explain the presence of coral in the midst of a zoological collection, it is necessary to remind the visitor that this beautiful substance, which is chiefly a deposit of carbonate of lime, is also the fossil remains of that animal known to zoologists as the polypus. These polypi put forth buds which remain attached to the parental polypus and generate other buds. And in this way countless polypi, linked together, yet maintaining a separate and distinct existence, spread themselves over miles and miles of submarine rocks, in endless varieties of shape, and leave their remains to be dredged by the hardy fishermen for the adornment of beauty. These beautiful polypi skeletons cluster in curious formations, as the visitor will perceive on examining the fine collection of corals before him. Among the remarkable coral formations to which the general visitor's attention may be directed are the sea mushroom, the remains of a single polypus of great size, the brainstone, which presents a circular mass of long, winding cells, and altogether has the appearance of the masses and veins of the brain, the sea pen, and the sea fan. In these cases, ranged together in the saloon, the visitor who feels interested in the infinite varieties of coral formation will find specimens that will give him a full idea of the architectural abilities of the active zoophytes that carry on their operations upon the rocks that lie not far below the surface of the ocean. From the coral tables, the visitor's way lies out of the Mammalia Saloon to the north, into a gallery of which all Englishmen who understand the value of a perfect museum are justly proud. The Eastern Zoological Gallery of the British Museum runs the entire length of the building. It is divided into 5 compartments, and its space is devoted to the display of birds, shells, and a few paintings. The birds exhibited in this gallery fill no less than 166 wall cases, and the shells which are distributed throughout the central space occupy 50 large tables. The lesser tables which are placed here and there near the birds being devoted to the display of birds' eggs. The pictures are hung above the wall cases. This general glance at the arrangement of the gallery will prevent the visitor from falling into the error of distracting his attention from one order of zoological development to another at frequent intervals. Already he has examined the various species of animal life which rank in the highest class, the Mammalia. Before him now are ranged vast numbers of the second class of animal life, and he will do well to pay these some attention and to get definite impressions regarding them before he turns to the other attractions which the museum offers. Before proceeding to examine the first order of birds which are in the first eastern room, the visitor should glance at the historical portraits suspended above the cases. Among them, he will find a Mary Queen of Scots by Cornelius Jansen, a Cromwell presented by the Protector to Colonel Rich of the Parliamentary Forces, by whose great-grandson it was bequeathed to the trustees of the museum, William, Duke of Cumberland by Maurier, Zucchero's Queen Elizabeth, Sir Peter Lely's Charles II, and the Queen of George II by Jarvis. Having sufficiently examined these works, the visitor should at once begin his inspection of the raptories, or birds of prey. These include some splendid ornithological specimens. They are divided into two families, those who pursue their depredations by day, and those which wait till night cloaks their proceedings. It is almost possible to read the special instincts of the two families in their formation and expression. The daring expressed in the fierce glances of the eagles and falcons bespeaks the fearless spoliator, in broad daylight and in the face of an enemy, whereas the large vacant eyes of the owls have a cruel coward look that stamps the midnight assassin. In the first case, the visitor will notice the strong bearded vulture of the Alpine and Himalayan mountains. The next 6 cases, 2 to 7, are filled with the varieties of the vulture, including the American, carrion, black, and king vultures, the South African sociable vulture, the Angola vulture of Congo, and towering above all, the great condor of the Andes with his immense breadth of wing. The vultures, with their fierce and cruel aspect, are nevertheless cowardly birds, and feed rather upon dead bodies than venture to kill for themselves. Next in order after the vultures, the visitor will find the eagle branch of the falcon family distributed in 10 cases, 8 to 17. This family includes some handsome birds. Foremost among these, the visitor will remark the athletic golden eagle of Europe, a frequenter of Great Britain. This bird preys upon hares and rabbits, and has been known to plant its claws in a young lamb with success. In this vicinity are also the Indian Pondicherry eagle, sacred to the Brahmins, the Egyptian booted eagle, the Brazilian eagle, the South American harpy eagle, the European Jean Leblanc eagle, the marine eagle of the Indian archipelago, the South American crested goshawk, the varieties of the osprey, and the short-tailed falcon from the Cape of Good Hope. Next, after the eagles, are ranged the kites and buzzards, 18 to 24. These include the South American caracaras, the European rough-legged falcon, the European kite, the Indian Colney falcon, varieties of the honey buzzard, and the North American spotted-tail hobby. The true falcons follow next in order of succession, 24 to 26. The courage of these birds is familiar to all who have read of the hunting days of old. In the cases before the visitor are grouped the European hobby and kestrel, and the peregrine and jet falcons. Many visitors from the country will be familiar with some of the sparrowhawks in the next case, 27. They may be often seen sweeping swiftly along near the earth, intent upon their prey. The last cases of diurnal birds of prey, 28 to 30, contain the harriers. These are birds of prey that meet their victims on the ground and frequent bog lands. The specimens here presented include the secretary of the Cape of Good Hope, the chanting falcon from the same region, the ash-colored falcon, hen harrier, and Madagascar falcon. And now, proceeding on his easterly way, the visitor approaches the birds that prey by night. They are solemnly assembled in 5 cases. Their reputed wisdom has its parallel in the human family. We also have our owls, with their large eyes and solemn demeanor, who cheat people into the idea that there must be something in all that solemnity and gravity of expression. Poets of the dismal school, however, owe a great debt of gratitude to these mysterious and unsociable birds. The visitor will at once call to mind the usual sequel of poems that open with the hooting of the owl, or with the intimation that it is the hour when the wise bird opens his eyes with some effect. Let us glance at the varieties of the dismal family before which we have brought the visitor. Here are the snowy owl of North America and the hawk owl. In the cases 32 and 33 are grouped the eagle owls, including the great-eared owls and the North American Virginian-eared owl. The next 2 cases contain the owlets, including the Tengmalm's owl of the north of Europe, the Javan Bay owl, and the barn-white owls of various countries. These birds close the collection of birds of prey, and the visitor, refraining from the temptation to inspect the central tables for the present, should advance into the room, the wall cases of which are filled with the perching birds. And that seems as good a place as any to end this evening's reading from How to See the British Museum in 4 Visits. You'll perhaps be surprised to know we're barely 1/3 of the way through the first visit, and I'm already feeling a little exhausted. I don't know if the British Museum in 1852 had a cafe, but that's where I would be headed right now. If you'd like to find out where we're going next and read this work for yourself, as always, you'll find a link to a free ebook from Project Gutenberg in the show description. If you'd like to connect or suggest a boring book you'd like to hear read, the best place to catch me is on Twitter at BoringBooksPod, or drop me an email via our website, www.boringbookspod.com. I always love hearing from you. Thank you so much for joining me for this evening's reading. Until our next boring book, good night.